The Whispering Portrait of Eliza Hawthorne. In the fog-shrouded coastal town of Hawthorne's Cove, Massachusetts, nestled between the jagged cliffs of the Atlantic and the whispering pines of New England, stood the grand but decaying Hawthorne Manor. It was early October 1882, and the air carried the salty tang of the sea, mixed with the earthy decay of fallen leaves. The town, named after the infamous family that founded it generations ago, clung to its Puritan roots like a barnacle to a shipwreck. Locals spoke in hushed tones of the Hawthorne curse, a shadow cast by the witch trials of Salem, just a stone's throw away to the south, where ancestors had hanged innocents in fits of pious frenzy back in 1692. But for 9-year-old Eliza Hawthorne, the youngest daughter of the manor's reclusive owner, Captain Elias Hawthorne, life was a canvas of simple joys. Eliza was no ordinary child. With her wild chestnut curls, freckled cheeks, and eyes the color of stormy seas, she possessed a gift that both enchanted and unnerved her family. From the age of 5, she had shown an uncanny talent for painting. Portraits so lifelike they seemed to breathe, capturing not just faces but the very souls behind them. Her father, a widowed sea captain hardened by years commanding clipper ships through tempests and typhoons, dismissed it as childish fancy. Her older brothers, Thomas at 25 and William at 22, both managing the family's dwindling shipping empire, teased her mercilessly, calling her the Little Witch of the Attic. Only her grandmother, old widow Abigail Hawthorne, saw the deeper truth. Abigail, with her rheumy eyes and gnarled hands twisted by years of rheumatism, would watch Eliza paint in the manor's dusty attic studio, muttering prayers under her breath. "The gift comes from the blood, child," she'd whisper, her voice like dry leaves rustling. "The old blood from Salem days. Use it wisely, or it will use you." Eliza didn't understand these warnings. She just loved the feel of the brush in her small hands, the way colors danced on canvas like spirits summoned from dreams. The manor itself was a labyrinth of creaking floorboards, shadowed hallways, and rooms frozen in time, each corner holding echoes of the family's turbulent history. Elias Hawthorne had returned from the China trade a decade earlier, in 1872, wealthy but broken. His beloved wife, Margaret, lost to typhus during a voyage to Canton. He filled the house with exotic artifacts, ivory statues from Canton, carved with intricate dragons, silk tapestries from Bombay, depicting elephants and gods, and a massive grand piano imported from London that no one played anymore, its keys yellowed and silent. But wealth couldn't silence the ghosts that haunted the place. Servants came and went like shadows, fleeing tales of footsteps in empty corridors at midnight, cold drafts from sealed chimneys, and portraits whose eyes seemed to follow you across the room, unblinking and judgmental. Eliza's favorite spot was the attic, a cavernous space cluttered with forgotten trunks bound in brass, moth-eaten gowns from her mother's wardrobe smelling of lavender and salt, and her own growing collection of paintings leaning against the rafters. Stacked against the walls were her works, likenesses of Mary the cook with her perpetual scowl and flour-dusted apron, old Gardner Hayes pruning roses in the overgrown estate gardens, even a haunting self-portrait where her own eyes gleamed with secrets she didn't know she held, painted during a fever dream last summer. On this particular crisp October morning, as golden light filtered through grimy skylights cracked by winter storms, Eliza set up a fresh canvas on her wobbly wooden easel. She had turned 9 just 3 weeks before, on September 15th, and her father had gifted her a set of rare oil paints imported from Paris. Deep crimsons like fresh blood, midnight blues echoing ocean depths, and golds that shimmered like pirate treasure, unearthed from Davy Jones's locker. "Paint something grand, Eliza," he'd grumbled that morning over breakfast. avoiding her gaze as he stirred his coffee with a silver spoon engraved with the family crest. Something to make the family proud, not more of those eerie faces. But Eliza had a different subject in mind, one that had haunted her sleep for days. It wasn't from life, but from dreams that left her waking with paint-stained fingers. A woman with porcelain skin pale as moonlight, raven hair piled high in an elaborate Victorian style, and eyes that pierced like daggers forged in hellfire. Who was she? Eliza didn't know her name or her story, but the urge to capture her was irresistible, like a siren's call pulling a ship to rocks. Dipping her finest sable brush into the cerulean blue, she began with the eyes. The most important part. Stroke by careful stroke, the face emerged from the white gesso undercoat. The woman's lips curved in a knowing smile that hinted at forbidden knowledge, her gaze locking onto the viewer with unnerving intensity, as if she could see through the canvas, into the soul of whoever dared to look. Hours passed unnoticed in the attic's timeless hush. The light shifted from golden to amber as storm clouds gathered outside over the Atlantic, thunder rumbling like distant cannon fire from an approaching naval fleet. Eliza stepped back, wiping paint from her hands on her ragged smock, her heart pounding with a mix of pride and unease. The portrait was alive, more real than any she'd painted before. The brush strokes so precise they mimicked the finest works of the old masters she'd glimpsed in her father's dusty library books. As she stared, transfixed, a chill prickled her skin like icy fingers trailing down her spine. Had the woman's eyes just flickered, shifting ever so slightly to follow her movement? She blinked hard, shaking her head to clear the illusion. Imagination, she told herself firmly, just the tricks of the dimming light. But deep down, in the pit of her stomach, a whisper stirred, faint as sea foam. This is no ordinary painting. Downstairs, the household stirred to life amid the scent of sizzling bacon and brewing coffee. Thomas Hawthorne, the elder brother at 25, burst into the kitchen where their father nursed a whiskey, despite the early hour. Tall and broad-shouldered, with a sailor's swagger from years aboard family ships, and a gambler's gleam in his eye from late nights at the Cove's taverns. Thomas was the family's wild card, always chasing the next big score. "Father, the ledgers are bleeding red again," he said, slamming a thick leather-bound book on the scarred oak table, sending crumbs flying. "That storm last month in September sank 2 of our clippers off Gloucester. Creditors are circling like sharks in chummed waters, demanding payment by week's end." Elias Hawthorne, his face weathered like driftwood battered by decades of gales, barely looked up from his glass. His once piercing blue eyes were dulled by grief over his wife's death and the laudanum he took for nerve pains. "We'll weather it, boy. The Hawthorns always do. We've survived worse. Pirates in the China Sea, blockades during the war." William, the steadier brother at 22, entered quietly from the study, spectacles perched on his aquiline nose, a ledger under his arm. A scholar by nature who preferred books to billows, he managed the office with meticulous care, his ink-stained fingers a testament to long nights balancing accounts. "Thomas is right, Father. We need to sell off assets. The China silks rotting in the warehouse, perhaps even parcels of the manor grounds. The bank in Boston won't wait forever." Elias slammed his glass down, whiskey sloshing over the rim. "Never sell Hawthorne Manor. It stood since 1692, built by our ancestor who judged witches in Salem. Through witch hunts, revolutions, and civil wars, it will stand through this financial squall." The argument hung heavy in the air like gunpowder smoke when Eliza descended the creaking grand staircase, her fresh canvas tucked carefully under her arm to avoid smudging. "Look what I made!" she cried excitedly, unfurling the portrait on the dining table amid the breakfast chaos. The brothers froze, forks midway to mouths. The woman's face stared back at them, regal yet sinister, dressed in a high-collared gown from a bygone era, lace cuffs embroidered with occult symbols. "Who the devil is that?" Thomas demanded, crossing himself, a rare gesture for the irreligious man who mocked churchgoers. "No one I know," Eliza said innocently, her freckled cheeks flushing with pride. "She came to me in a dream, clear as day." Elias's face paled to the color of sea foam. He leaned closer, breath catching in his throat like a hooked fish. "Impossible. That's Isabella Blackwood, my great-aunt." The name hung like smoke from a cannon's muzzle. Isabella Blackwood had been a beauty who scandalized Hawthorne's Cove in the 1830s. Rumored witch and seductress who accused the town elders of dark deeds tied to Salem's lingering sins. Secret rituals buried treasures from hanged witches. She vanished mysteriously in 1835 after a public confrontation, presumed drowned in the cove during a squall. Her portrait had hung in the manor until a suspicious fire, conveniently set by unknown hands, destroyed it 20 years prior, in 1862. "How did you paint her, child?" Elias whispered, his voice trembling like a leaf in the wind. Eliza shrugged her small shoulders. "I just knew her face, like she'd been waiting for me to see her. That night, as rain lashed the windows like a cat-o'-nine-tails and wind howled through the pines, strange things began at Hawthorne Manor. Thomas, retiring late from a poker game at the local tavern, passed Eliza's attic door on the way to his room. A soft whisper emanated from behind the wood, clear as a bell. "Thomas, the debts, pay them, or drown like the ships." He jolted awake in his bed hours later, sweating through his nightshirt, convinced he'd imagined it in his rum-soaked stupor. But in the morning, he found a single raven feather on his pillow, black as Isabella's hair, with no open window to explain its presence. William, poring over ledgers by candlelight in the study until the wee hours, heard it too. William, the ledgers lie, uncover the truth hidden in father's logs. He dismissed it as wind whistling through cracks, but his quill snapped in his hand without warning, ink splattering the parchment to form eerie words. Betrayal. Elias, alone in his study with a decanter of whiskey, stared at the restored portrait Eliza had propped on the mantel, despite his protests. Elias. The sea took her, but I return to claim what's mine. He poured another drink, hands shaking so badly that liquor splashed the rug. Eliza slept soundly in her attic bed, dreaming of the woman smiling in approval, her brush clutched like a talisman. But in the attic, the portrait's eyes gleamed in the moonlight filtering through the skylight, watching the house below with predatory patience. The whispers had begun, infiltrating every corner of Hawthorne Manor, and the family would soon learn they could no longer ignore the voice from the canvas. Little did they know, Eliza's innocent brushstrokes had awakened something ancient, a force that painted fates in blood, not paint, and the first stroke was already drying on the family's doom. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Shadows, late October, 1882. The days following Eliza's revelation of the portrait blurred into a tense fog at Hawthorne Manor, where every shadow seemed to harbor Isabella's gaze. It was late October 1882 now, with All Saints' Day approaching, and pumpkins rotting on doorsteps in Hawthorne's Cove. Whispers spread like sea mist through the house, growing bolder with each creak of the floorboards and flicker of gas lamps. Thomas Hawthorne, ever the skeptic with a flask of rum perpetually in his pocket, tried to laugh it off over breakfast the next morning. Salted cod, fresh biscuits, and strong coffee steamed on the table as he jabbed a fork toward the portrait now hanging in the dining hall, its frame hastily dusted by Mary the cook. It's just a painting, Father. The girl's got talent, I'll give her that. Better than those scribbles in the Boston papers. But ghosts? Bah. Pour me another cup, Mary. Elias stared at the canvas, his fork hovering mid-air, transfixed. Isabella's eyes seemed to follow him around the room, her smile sharper in the harsh morning light slanting through lace curtains. Talent or not, that face brings trouble. Burn it in the hearth, Eliza, before it curses us all. But Eliza, perched on her chair with paint still smudged on her freckled cheek like war paint, shook her head fiercely, curls bouncing. No, Father. She's family. She wants to stay here where she belongs. William adjusted his wire-rimmed spectacles, peering closer at the portrait with a scholar's curiosity. Remarkable likeness, down to the mole on her left cheek. But how, Eliza? You've never seen her portrait. It burned before you were born. Eliza shrugged innocently, buttering her bread with a pat of golden butter from the dairy. She told me in my dreams, showed me her face, her gown, everything. The brothers exchanged uneasy glances. Told her. In dreams, perhaps, but the implications chilled the room. That very night, the whispers escalated from murmurs to commands. Thomas stumbled home, late from the Black Anchor Tavern in Hawthorne's Cove, reeking of cheap rum and regret after losing heavily at cards to old Captain Merrick, a rival shipper with a fleet twice the size of the Hawthorns. As he fumbled with his key in the Manor's heavy oak door, slick with rain, a voice slithered from the shadows of the porch. Thomas, debts pile like wrecks on the reef. Merrick holds your notes for $5,000. Pay, or sink beneath the waves. He spun around, heart pounding like a drum in his chest, lantern swinging wildly. Nothing but wind rattling the shutters and pines bending in the gale. Inside, he climbed the winding stairs, flask trembling in his calloused hand. In his room, he'd mockingly hung a copy of Eliza's sketch of Isabella. He'd had Mary frame it as a joke. Now those painted eyes gleamed unnaturally. Betray your brother, Thomas. William hides gold sovereigns in the attic rafters. Take it and pay Merrick. He laughed nervously, a hollow bark, dousing the whale oil lamp with shaking fingers. Sleep came fitfully, haunted by visions of drowning ships, their masts cracking as green waves swallowed them whole. Dawn broke gray and relentless over the cove, gulls crying like banshees. Down in the kitchen, Mary the cook gossiped with the new maid, young Bridget from County Kerry, Ireland, her accent thick as porridge. Heard the whispers last night, miss, like a woman moanin' in the walls, callin' names. Bridget crossed herself thrice, rosary beads clicking. Aye, and the young Mrs. Paintin, eyes like the devil's own, followin' ye about. Me'd a warned o' such in the old country. Eliza overheard from the pantry door, slipping away quietly to the attic without a word. Her brushes waited on the scarred workbench, palettes crusted with dried paint. But today, the urge to create was different, almost compulsive. She felt pulled toward the canvas, as if invisible hands guided her wrist, dipping into vermilion red mixed with black for a bloody hue. She began a new sketch. Not Isabella alone, but Thomas, his face twisted in fear and desperation, waves lapping at his boots. Hours flew by like minutes. When she finished, his painted eyes stared back, pleading for mercy she couldn't give. A sharp knock shattered the silence. William entered the attic stairs, papers clutched in his fist like a lawyer's brief. Eliza, we must talk. The ledgers, there's discrepancies. Thousands missing over the past 2 years, siphoned to gambling dens by someone. Eliza tilted her head, brush still in hand. From Thomas's games, William froze, spectacles slipping down his nose. How did you know that? It's not in any books. She smiled faintly, eerily like Isabella's portrait. She knows. She sees everything. William's face hardened into resolve. This has to stop. The portrait comes down today. But as he reached for it downstairs in the dining hall, a gust of wind, impossible indoors with all windows latched, knocked him back onto the Persian rug. The canvas rattled violently on its hook, but stayed firm, as if nailed by spectral hands. Elias watched from his armchair by the fire, laudanum bottle within reach on the side table. "Leave it, son. Some forces we don't fight with human hands." Tension simmered through the week like a pot on the boil. Townsfolk in Hawthorne's Cove buzzed with rumors carried on salt winds, strange lights in the manor windows, cries at night mistaken for shipwrecks. Old widow Abigail Hawthorne visited on Thursday, her cane tapping like a metronome on the marble foyer floor. In the parlor, amid velvet settees and a ticking grandfather clock, she cornered Eliza by the hearth. "Child, that blood calls to you louder each day." Isabella wasn't just kin. She was accused of witchcraft in 1833, same as the Salem folk our ancestors condemned. The elders drove her to drown herself in the cove during a ritual tide, or so they whispered. But her spirit lingered, cursing us for our silence and complicity. Eliza's eyes widened, paintbrush twirling in her fingers. "She whispers truths, Grandma. Truths about all of us." Abigail clutched her woolen shawl tighter. "Truths that kill. Mark my words. Burn that portrait before it claims another Hawthorne." That evening, disaster struck like lightning from a clear sky. Thomas rode to the docks on his bay mare for a desperate meeting with Merrick, storm clouds brewing over the horizon like an omen. He tied the horse to a piling slick with seaweed, entering Merrick's cramped office, smelling of tar and tobacco. Merrick, fat and smug with a gold watch chain across his paunch, waved Eliza's portrait sketch, somehow procured from a tavern patron. "Your sister's art, eh? Spooky stuff, boy. Pay the 5,000 by Friday, or I seize the remaining ships at auction." Thomas snarled, veins bulging in his neck, lunging across the desk. Fists flew in a brutal brawl, chairs toppling. Merrick crumpled to the floor, head cracking on the iron desk edge with a sickening thud. Dead. Blood pooled on the planked floor. Thomas fled on horseback, knuckles raw and bloodied, galloping home through sheets of driving rain that stung like needles. He burst into the manor foyer, soaked to the bone and wild-eyed. "I killed him. Merrick's dead by my hand. God help me, the bastard pushed me to it." Elias and William rushed in from the parlor, faces draining of color. "What have you done, boy? The law will hang you." But Eliza stood calm in the hall, holding her sketch of Thomas. His painted eyes now dripped red, actual paint bleeding down the paper like fresh blood. "You were warned," the whisper echoed from the walls, chilling their spines. Thomas collapsed to his knees, sobbing. "It was her voice at the tavern, pushin' me to fight, laughin' as he fell." Sheriff Amos Tate arrived at midnight, lantern swinging from his saddle, his walrus mustache dripping rain. Hawthorne's Cove's lawman, stern and broad as a barrel, grilled them in the foyer under sputtering gaslight. Merrick's throat, bruised black, head bashed in, self-defense in a brawl, or murder over debts. Town's talkin' witchcraft already. Elias spun tales of a drunken quarrel gone wrong. No mention of portraits or whispers. Tate eyed the dining hall canvas suspiciously, feeling its gaze. "Eyes following me like a hound. Burn that damned thing before I come back with a warrant." But Eliza's tearful plea, "It's innocent, Sheriff, just my art," swayed him temporarily. Investigation pending, but whispers already sealed Thomas's guilt in town tongues wagging at the market. Jail loomed like a noose. In the attic that night, Eliza wept silently over her brushes. "Why, Isabella? Why push him to this?" No answer came, but her original portrait shifted slightly on the easel, eyes glinting. Below, Thomas paced his room, shadows lengthening across the wallpaper. One down, Thomas. William next. The gold sovereigns are yours now. Take them from the attic. He clutched his head, madness edging his eyes, but temptation gnawed like rats in the walls. Dawn brought worse revelations. William discovered attic floorboards pried loose near Eliza's easel, gold sovereigns hidden there by Elias during hard times. Yes, but now gone, scattered or stolen by unseen hands. He confronted Thomas in the breakfast room. "You thief! Father's emergency fund, gone because of your greed!" Fists nearly flew amid shattering crockery, but Elias separated them with a roar. "Enough! The curse consumes us from within. Stop feeding it." Eliza watched from the stairs, her new paintings multiplying on the floor. Merrick's lifeless face in oils, gold spilling like blood from a wound. Bridget the maid fled screaming that afternoon, claiming she'd seen Isabella's full figure in the hallway mirror, beckoning with painted fingers. Servants dwindled to Mary alone. Elias turned to the church in desperation. Reverend Josiah Crane, descendant of a Salem judge, arrived with Bible, cross, and holy water at dusk. Tall, gaunt, with a voice like grinding gravel from years of fire and brimstone sermons, he preached of generational sin in the parlor. "This portrait harbors the Blackwood witch. Begone!" But as he splashed water on the canvas, Isabella's smile widened mockingly, and Crane paused, unnerved. "Tomorrow at dawn, full exorcism, pray Hawthorns." Night deepened like ink in water. Thomas sneaked to the attic, desperate for escape money from the gold. Eliza slept nearby on her cot. He eyed her paints, then the portrait, matches in hand. "Burn it," he thought, striking flint. Flames licked the canvas edge. But an unnatural wind, no open window, extinguished them instantly. "Not yet," the whisper commanded, voice like cracking ice. Thomas fled, terror twisting his features. William in the study by candlelight. Found a note in Isabella's elegant script on his desk. "Your father's secret. The sea didn't take mother. I poisoned her tea before the voyage. Horror gripped him like a vice. Elias's wife Margaret, poisoned by Isabella's lingering spite. He burst into father's bedroom. Truth, damn you!" Elias confessed through choking tears. Isabella, the jealous great-aunt, had sabotaged the voyage with tainted supplies. Family secret, buried deeper than sea graves. Rage boiled over. Brothers clashed downstairs in the foyer, portraits crashing from walls in the melee. Eliza woke to chaos rushing down. "Stop! She's uniting us against our own lies!" But too late. Thomas grabbed a fireplace poker in fury, swinging at William. He missed, slipped on the oriental rug slick with spilled whiskey. His neck snapped on the banister with a crack like breaking timber, dead at the foot of the stairs. William stared in shock, poker dropping from numb fingers. Eliza screamed from the landing above. Elias rushed in, face ashen as parchment. "My boys! Both gone now!" Whispers laughed through the house like hyenas, echoing off vaulted ceilings. 2 strokes complete. Sheriff Tate returned at first light, finding Thomas's body sprawled unnaturally. Murder, or suicide in despair. Town demands answers. Elias babbled of family strife and curses. William, shell-shocked and bandaged from the fight, pointed mutely to the portraits, now with eyes blackened as pitch. Tate crossed himself. Witchcraft or madness, this ends soon. As they carted Thomas's body to the undertaker's wagon, Eliza retreated to the attic. New canvas, stretched taut. Isabella's face, but now with Thomas's ghost behind her, translucent and accusing. The brush moved of its own accord in her hand. Manor fell silent. but whispers plotted the next victim. Elias barricaded himself in his study. William turned to father's laudanum bottle for solace. Eliza painted on, innocent vessel for an ancient revenge. Hawthorne's Cove held its breath, unaware the portrait hungered for the whole town next. Chapter 3. The Canvas Bleeds, November-December 1882. The days following Thomas's tragic death draped Hawthorne Manor in a pall of unrelenting dread, as if the very walls wept black tears of ink and shadow. It was early November 1882 now, with Thanksgiving passed in mournful silence. No turkey, no feast, just cold winds rattling the panes and the scent of funeral wreaths lingering in the foyer. Hawthorne's Cove, huddled under skies perpetually bruised with storm clouds, the Atlantic roaring like a beast denied its prey, waves crashing against the cliffs with the fury of damned souls. Elias Hawthorne, once a pillar of stoic resolve who'd faced down mutinies at sea, had become a hollow shell, shuffling through the house in rumpled suits stained with whiskey spills and laudanum drops, his eyes darting to corners where whispers lingered like tobacco smoke. "It's her, always her," he'd mutter to empty rooms, clutching the restored portrait of Isabella Blackwood that Eliza had obsessively repainted overnight, now propped accusingly on the grand piano in the parlor, its surface unnaturally glossy. William, thrust into the role of family patriarch at 22 after Thomas's fall, shouldered the burden with grim determination, poring over ledgers by flickering gaslight until dawn broke over the widow's walk. But even he couldn't ignore the mounting signs. Flocks of ravens perching on the roof ridges, their harsh cries echoing Thomas's final gasp on the stairs. Doors creaking open of their own accord, to reveal empty bedchambers filled with the briny scent of salt water and decaying fish. Eliza, the 9-year-old epicenter of the horror, withdrew further into the attic sanctuary, her once bright eyes now shadowed hollows ringed in violet from sleepless nights. She painted ceaselessly, canvases piling like tombstones around her workbench. Thomas drowning in emerald waves despite his stairfall, his face twisted in silent accusation toward the living. "I didn't mean to summon this," she'd whisper to the brushes that seemed to dance in her tiny hands, guiding strokes she barely controlled. Grandmother Abigail, frail as yellowed parchment and coughing from the damp, confronted her one fog-choked afternoon in the attic, leaning heavily on her cane. "The blood calls to you louder than thunder, child. Isabella's blood, tainted from the start. She wasn't just a witch accused in 1833. They burned her effigy in the town square after driving her to the cove. But her spirit clung to our line like smoke from the pyre, waiting for an artist's hand." Abigail revealed a yellowed diary from 1835, bound in human-like leather, its pages brittle with age and stained by seawater. Isabella had seduced town elders to expose their witch-hunt atrocities. Secret pacts with Salem judges, buried talismans from hanged women, then vanished into the sea during a ritual tide meant to bind her soul to Hawthorne artifacts like lockets and portraits. "The original painting was her anchor to this world," Abigail rasped, winded. "You woke it with your gift, Eliza. Now it hungers for justice against every Hawthorne sin." But Eliza only smiled faintly, her voice echoing oddly with a mature timbre. "Justice paints itself, Gran. Watch the colors bleed." That night, as gale-force winds battered the manor's slate roof and rain drummed like fingers on drums, William experienced his first direct assault from the portrait's power. Alone in the study amid stacks of yellowed shipping manifests, tallying debts that Thomas's gambling had ballooned to ruinous heights, over $20,000 owed to Boston banks, he heard the whispers intensify from faint murmurs to a cacophonous chorus rising from the oaken walls themselves. "William. Liar. thief. The ledgers burn with your complicity." He slammed the heavy books shut, heart pounding like a piston, only to see black ink pooling on the mahogany desk, like congealing blood, forming accusatory words in Isabella's script. "You hid father's smuggling, opium from China holds, souls drowned for gold profits, crews abandoned to sharks." William paled to ghostly white. It was true, a secret he'd helped bury. Elias had skirted federal laws during the trade wars of the 1870s, deliberately scuttling evidence-laden ships with loyal crews aboard to claim insurance. No one outside the family knew. Frantic, sweat beading on his brow, he raced upstairs to the attic to destroy the source, boots thumping on stairs. But the attic door wouldn't budge. Locked from within by invisible hands, knob ice-cold to the touch. Through the brass keyhole, he glimpsed Eliza, seemingly asleep on her cot. Yet her small hand twitched rhythmically, brush in grip, adding precise strokes to a massive new canvas propped on the easel. William bound in rusted chains, sinking inexorably into abyssal ocean depths, bubbles escaping his screaming mouth. Panic seized him like a kraken's tentacle. He fetched a woodshed axe, its blade nicked from splitting logs, and hacked at the door until splinters flew like shrapnel, wood groaning in protest. Bursting in amid sawdust clouds, he swung wildly at the Isabella portrait dominating the wall. But the blade halted midair, repelled by a force like unyielding iron walls. The canvas rippled unnaturally, Isabella's eyes blazing crimson fire, and William's axe arm went numb from shoulder to fingertips, veins blackening beneath his skin as if poisoned by nightshade. Pain lanced through him. He dropped the weapon, fleeing down the stairs, collapsing in the hallway where Mary found him at midnight, raving deliriously about eyes that swallow light and souls. By morning, the entire town of Hawthorne's Cove buzzed with dark rumors carried on fishing boats and market stalls, from the Black Anchor Tavern to the general store, run by Widow Jenkins. Reverend Josiah Crane, the firebrand preacher and descendant of infamous Salem trial Judge John Hathorne, arrived uninvited at noon. Bible clutched like a weapon, his black frock coat flapping like raven wings. Tall and gaunt as a gallows post, with a voice like grinding gravel honed by decades of hellfire sermons, he demanded to see the Hawthorne devilry in the parlor where the family gathered amid flickering beeswax candles. Elias, emboldened by desperation and a swig of laudanum, shoved the portrait forward on its easel. "Exorcise it if you can, Reverend. End this nightmare." Crane sprinkled holy water from a silver aspergillum, chanting Latin rites that echoed through the vaulted ceilings. "Exorcismus te, omnis immundus spiritus." But as consecrated droplets hit the canvas, Isabella's painted lips parted in audible laughter, mocking, resonant, and the room plunged into unnatural chaos. Candles extinguished simultaneously in a gust from nowhere, plunging them into Stygian darkness, pierced only by jagged lightning flashes outside. Reverend Crane screamed hoarsely, clawing at his own throat as spectral hands, icy as Arctic gales, invisible yet vice-like, lifted him skyward toward the chandelier. Eliza watched impassively from the spiral stairs, murmuring in a voice not wholly her own. "He hanged her kin in 1692. The sea claims judges now." Crane crashed down onto the marble floor with bone-crunching force, neck snapped at an unnatural angle, body twisted like driftwood washed ashore. Blood trickled from his ear, staining the Persian rug. The Reverend's horrific death shattered the fragile piece like fine crystal. Sheriff Amos Tate, the burly ex-whaler with a walrus mustache and a limp from a harpoon accident, sealed the manor gates with rope and posted deputies, questioning the survivors under harsh lantern light in the stable yard. 3 deaths in a fortnight. Your brother Thomas on the stairs, Merrick bashed at the docks. Now the preacher snapped like kindling. Town's calling for blood, Hawthorne. Witch blood. William, arm bandaged and throbbing black, confessed fragments in a hoarse whisper. The portrait's relentless whispers revealing buried crimes. Eliza's impossible knowledge of smuggling logs locked in his desk. She's not my sister anymore. Something ancient wears her face. Eliza, perched like a porcelain doll on a hay bale, revealed more with chilling calm. Thomas killed over debts to Blackwood-descended smugglers long ago. Reverend's ancestor swung Isabella's lover from these very cliffs in 1833. Father's ships carried cursed opium, ghosts in the hold crying for vengeance. The sheriff recoiled, lantern flickering. The details matched dusty unsolved cases from town vaults, records yellowed since the 1870s. As he departed at dusk, vowing warrants and a coroner's inquest, a new visceral horror unfolded indoors. Eliza collapsed suddenly in the parlor, convulsing on the blood-stained rug, her pale skin splitting like overripe fruit under invisible pressure. From the wounds seeped not blood, but vivid oils, crimson reds, indigo blues, shimmering golds, pooling on the floorboards into grotesque shapes. They formed a meticulous map of Hawthorne's Cove, marking unmarked graves from the 1692 witch trials hidden under churchyards and cliffs, each pulsing with accusatory crimson light. Elias fell to his knees beside her, sobbing brokenly. "What have I unleashed upon us all?" But Eliza rose unsteadily, eyes fully transformed into Isabella's predatory stare. Ancient, merciless. "The final strokes approach, Captain. William next, then you. The curse paints its masterpiece in Hawthorne blood." Desperate for salvation, William unearthed deeper secrets from Abigail's 1835 diary that night. Discovering a ritual scrawled in faded ink, burned the original Blackwood locket. Forged in 1692 Salem silver, hidden in the manor's sea chest beneath the cellar stairs, under the next blood moon in mid-December. Only then does the anchor shatter. Heart racing, he pried open the rusted sea chest amid cobwebs thick as veils and rusted anchors from Elias's voyages, lantern casting long shadows. But as the lid creaked up, the Isabella portrait materialized impossibly on the damp cellar wall, painted there by writhing shadows, eyes glowing. Smuggler's son. Join the drowned crews. Chaos erupted. Loose chains from the chest whipped his legs like serpents, dragging him inexorably toward a hidden well, brimming with fetid, brackish seawater that shouldn't exist indoors. He screamed for Eliza, glimpsing her silhouette at the top of the cellar stairs, brush in hand, adding meticulous final details to his drowning portrait upstairs. The chains, the bubbles, the terror. The manor's ancient timbers groaned like a dying galleon in a typhoon, dust sifting from beams. William fought, grabbing a protruding root, but the whispers drowned his cries. Sink! With a final gurgling gasp, he vanished into the well's depths, body claimed by the unnatural tide. Elias heard the splash from above, rushing down too late. "William! No!" 3 Hawthornes gone, only he and Eliza remained. Hawthorne's Cove mourned in whispers as December's blood moon rose fat and red, but in the attic, amid swirling paints defying gravity and splattering walls, Eliza whispered back, not her childish voice, but too entwined in harmony. The canvas is nearly complete. The town pays next for Salem's sins. Outside, lightning cracked the sky, illuminating massive flocks of ravens circling the widow's walk, harbingers of the Hawthorne blood price, yet unpaid in full. The portrait hungered still, shadows lengthening toward the cliffs, promising revelations darker than any ocean trench. Chapter 4. The Final Stroke, mid-December 1882. The blood moon hung low over Hawthorne's Cove like a festering wound on mid-December 1882's frozen sky, its crimson light bathing the cliffs in gore as the long brewing storm finally shattered upon the town. Gale winds howled from the Atlantic, whipping pines into frenzy and sending spray from crashing waves high over the manor walls. Lightning cracked the heavens like veins of divine fire, illuminating Hawthorne Manor in stark, spectral flashes that made the structure seem alive, pulsing with malice. Inside, the air hung thick with the mingled scents of salt brine, melted candle wax, burning oak logs in the hearth, and something fouler, decay, like an open grave, freshly disturbed after centuries. Eliza Hawthorne huddled in her attic studio, amid toppled easels and paint-splattered floors, her small frame shivering, not from the biting cold seeping through cracks, but from the relentless whispers now echoing from every portrait stacked against the rafters. The eyes of Mary the cook, old Gardner Hayes, Thomas, William, even Elias, all gleamed with Isabella's borrowed malice, tracking her every shallow breath, every twitch of her fingers. "You woke me fully, child," the voices chorused in unison, a dissonant symphony of the damned rising from canvases. "Now paint the end of the Hawthorne line." Downstairs in his barricaded study, Elias Hawthorne clutched Widow Abigail's ancient 1835 journal to his chest, its leather cover cracked like old skin, parched by sea voyages. The words blurred through his laudanum haze. "The Blackwood blood binds the curse eternally. Salem's hanged witch swore vengeance on the Hawthornes who betrayed and judged her kin. Isabella was no mere witch. She was the vessel for that first soul. The child artist will unmake or remake it all under Blood Moon fire." Elias had dismissed these ravings as senile madness before Thomas's stair plunge and William's cellar drowning. But now truth clawed at his fraying sanity like a shark's teeth. Abigail herself had passed quietly 2 nights prior in her bed, whispering final warnings before succumbing to her cough. Cause of death listed as old age, but Elias suspected the curse's toll. A thunderous knock shook the study's reinforced door amid the gale. "Father!" Eliza's voice pierced the howling wind, high and desperate. "It's coming for the manor. The whole town rises against us." Elias flung open the door with trembling hands, pulling his paint-smeared daughter inside and bolting it shut. Her face was ashen as moonlight, cheeks streaked with crimson and indigo, like tribal war paint. Eyes wide with a cocktail of terror and something profoundly ancient lurking beneath. "Grandmother's journal, the full truth," she gasped, clutching a massive fresh canvas under her arm, still wet with oils. "Isabella wasn't your great-aunt from the 1830s. She was the reincarnation of the first Eliza Hawthorne, hanged in 1692 as a witch for painting damning portraits of Salem elders' hypocrisies. Hidden sins exposed on canvas." Elias staggered back against the desk, knocking over the laudanum vial. Impossible. The family buried that progenitor sin deep, renaming her Isabella to cloak the shame. Eliza shook her head vehemently, curls matted. "No, father. You Hawthornes covered it for generations, burning records and portraits. Isabella was her reborn soul, trapped in family artifacts, waiting for artist blood to paint vengeance anew. I'm her vessel now. The gift isn't mine. It's the curse reborn." Outside the manor walls, under torchlight flickering like accusatory stars in the downpour, the townsfolk of Hawthorne's Cove gathered at the wrought iron gates. A mob of 200 strong. Fishermen, merchants, widows, armed with axes, pitchforks, and lanterns, led by a deputy filling Sheriff Tate's shoes after the lawman's sudden illness, but spurred by grieving families. They chanted twisted psalms laced with venom. "Witches spawn, end the curse that sank our ships, poisoned our wells, killed our reverend," the deputy bellowed, face twisted in fanatic rage. Tales had spread. Crane's snapped neck. William's vanished body pulled from the cove mangled, all pinned on Eliza's devil art. "Burn the manor! Burn the girl and her paintings!" The mob surged forward, splintering the gates with axes hewn from hawthorn pines, splinters flying like arrows. Elias grabbed his Navy revolver from the desk drawer, a relic from China Seas, loading it with shaking hands, powder grains spilling. "Stay behind me, Eliza. I won't let them take you." But she stepped forward boldly, eyes hardening into Isabella's dagger gaze, ancient fire kindling. "No, Father. Watch the final ritual unfold." With deliberate, almost reverent strokes under the study's gas chandelier, Eliza unveiled her massive final canvas on the wide windowsill, facing the raging mob through rain-lashed panes. It depicted Hawthorne's Cove engulfed in apocalyptic flames, cliffs crumbling into the roiling sea below, every soul twisted in eternal agony. Deputy at the center, his torch backfiring to consume his own flesh in ironic justice. The moment the painting faced the blood moonstorm, the whispers crescendoed into an unearthly howl that shattered every window pane in the manor simultaneously. Glass exploding inward like shrapnel. Wind tore through the breach, carrying iridescent paint flakes from the canvas like black snow whipped into a blizzard. The deputy halted mid-charge at the splintered gates, his torch extinguishing as if drowned in invisible depths. He stared transfixed at the glowing study window, mouth agape in horror, clutching his chest. "My heart, the fire inside devours me," he screamed, collapsing into the mud as white foam bubbled from his lips, convulsions racking his frame. One by one, the mob faltered in chain reaction. Axes dropped from hands blistered raw as if burned, throats constricted with spectral nooses tightening, eyes weeping rivulets of blood as Isabella's collective gaze pierced from every Hawthorne portrait now glowing in windows. Screams mingled with thunderclaps as 24 souls writhed on the soaked grounds, their very life forces siphoned visibly into the distant canvas, strokes darkening and thickening with stolen vitality, colors vivid as fresh slaughter. Elias watched in abject horror from the study, revolver slipping from numb fingers to clatter on floorboards. "What infernal power have you unleashed, child?" Eliza turned slowly, her innocent face no longer a child's. Shadows writhed serpentine beneath her translucent skin, chestnut hair morphing strand by strand to raven black like Isabella's midnight tresses. "What we artists always do, Father, paint the unvarnished truth of sins unpaid." But victory soured into shattering revelation amid the chaos. From the journal's final page, illuminated by a lightning bolt's glare, words burned into Elias's vision like branded iron. "The curse feeds eternally on denial and buried guilt. To break its chain forever, the vessel must paint its own end, self-portrait in flames without fear, under blood moon witness." Eliza's eyes, now fully Isabella's, widened in dawning comprehension. "Father, I see the true ritual now. It ends with me." Ignoring his pleas, she seized a sharpened palette knife from her canvas kit, slashing wildly at the massive mob destruction scene. Crimson paint, mixed deliberately with her own blood from a deep thumb prick, smeared the apocalyptic vision. Stroke by frantic stroke, guided by the fading voices, she repainted redemption. Townsfolk rising healed from mud, cliffs standing eternal and firm against the sea, the deputy kneeling in tearful penance before the manor steps, torches quenched in mercy. The manor groaned deeply as ethereal chains of curse energy snapped audibly throughout its bones. Whispers faded from cacophony to mournful sighs. Then silence. Outside, the mob stilled as one, then gasped awake in confusion. Wounds vanishing like dawn mist, blisters gone, bloodstains evaporated, nooses imaginary. The deputy rose unsteadily, tears streaming down his weathered face, whispering hoarsely, "Forgive us our generational sins, the witch trial's debt." The storm parted dramatically as the blood moon crested, silver moonlight bathing the cove in purifying mercy, winds dying to zephyrs. Elias embraced his daughter tightly amid the glass shards, sobbing relief. "You've saved us all, Eliza." But she pulled away gently, her gaze distant and sea-deep. "Not saved, father. Transmuted. Isabella's, no, the first Eliza's, blood runs true now, forever in me." Days later, as December snow blanketed Hawthorne's Cove in uneasy peace, Elias oversaw the ritual burning of all cursed portraits in a bonfire on the cliffs. All save one. Eliza's transformed self-portrait, where innocence and ancient power intertwined, now hung reverently in the town hall as a talisman against future sins. Whispers ceased entirely. Long-sunk ships seemed to rise in dreams as metaphors of renewal. Wells ran pure once more. But Eliza vanished without trace. One foggy dawn on December 20th, leaving only a simple note pinned to her attic easel. "I paint, where the old blood calls across the seas. Fear, not the gift. Wield it with truth." Search parties scoured cliffs and coves for days, finding only her abandoned easel by the highest promontory. A half-finished seascape where turbulent waves formed watchful eyes gazing toward Europe's horizon. Elias never spoke publicly of that blood moon night, retreating into opium dreams and quiet philanthropy, funding a town library of forbidden arts and histories. The deputy, reformed, preached redemption sermons, erecting a memorial plaque for Salem victims on the church steps. The Hawthornes endured as a line, their generational curse transmuted. Not destroyed outright, but mastered through Eliza's sacrifice. Yet on stormy winter eves, when blood moonlight hits the town hall self-portrait just so, Eliza's eyes flicker with inner life. Some swear they've seen her ghost ship on the horizon, sails billowing, painting fates across distant oceans, ensuring no Hawthorne or Cove sin goes unframed or unpunished. Hawthorne's Cove thrives today as a tourist haven, whispering tales of witches, whispers, and wonders to visitors drawn to its haunted allure. But locals still avoid the manor after dark, for in the attic, amid dust motes dancing in moonbeams, a single vast blank canvas waits patiently on the easel. And if you listen close through the wind's mournful sigh off the Atlantic, you might hear a single brushstroke echoing, and a child's voice, innocent yet eternal. What truth will you paint next? The final stroke, dear listener, is yours to make.